Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I'm Bart here to discuss the upcoming U.S. Women's National Team friendlies against the numbers 3 and 4 teams in the world. For all those who get mad at the U.S. men for not playing good quality opponents, well, again, the U.S. are giving you what you want. That's right, we're going to talk about the U.S. friendlies against Sweden and France, both in Europe, in those respective countries, coming up over the weekend. But before we do that, again, I need to remind you to please subscribe to this podcast. That means you will subscribe to Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening right now. You'll not only get every episode of Soccer for Us, you'll get every episode of the daily Soccer Down Here show, which is really ramping up as CONCACAF Champions League starts and the MLS season begins in a couple weeks. You'll also get every episode of the weekly Soccer Over There show, focusing on the European game, and the other content that is produced by the STH network. Before we get started, I do have just one slight note from U.S. Soccer that I think is newsworthy. The U.S. Youth National Team identification camps have started up again. The program is returning to the field with a series of, quote, BioSteel Youth National Team Regional Identification Centers in the spring. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic put a halt on all youth national team identification processes, put a halt to the competitions that were going on. In fact, both the U17 and U20 competitions that were going to happen this year were put on hold. So it's been a while, but it's good to know that U.S. Soccer is again starting their identification and talent sourcing programs again. As you may know, the Development Academy was disbanded during the COVID-19 pandemic. That was kind of a result of COVID-19, but more so something that has been in the works for a while. So the DA is gone. This is still U.S. Soccer's way to find talent, but they are leaving the actual development of talent up to local clubs, specifically looking at MLS and NWSL teams, as well as some, as we talked earlier on this show, United Women's Soccer teams, and even USL teams that have established really good academies in their existence. So that's kind of cool and a good sign that we are, in fact, starting to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know we're not fully there, but I got my second dose of the vaccine this week. For all those who care, I felt fairly okay during the 24 hours after my shot. Really, all I was tired, and I took a lot of naps. My arm hurt, obviously, is what happens a lot of times when you get a vaccination or a shot in your arm. But other than that, nothing really problematic to report. And again, it's just, we're almost there. And it's nice that MLS teams will be having fans in their stands. But at the end of the day, it's signaling a return to something normal in our lives, which is nice to see. Now, let's talk about the U.S. Women's National Team. The last time we chatted, I had Jackie Gutierrez on the show to break down the She Believes Cup. They won all 3 matches. Not perfect, but, you got 3 wins against Canada, Brazil, and Argentina. You didn't concede a goal. Vlatko Andonovski is still undefeated as head coach of this Women's National Team program. Going into these friendlies, you're facing much tougher competition, although Brazil was a pretty good opponent. However, I will say that both Sweden and France do not have their full strength squads for different reasons, but COVID-19 has a lot to do with that, unfortunately. So before we talk about our opponents, let's look at the U.S. Women's National Team roster for these matches against Sweden and France on April 10 and 13. The 3 goalkeepers Vlatko called up are Jane Campbell from Houston, Casey Murphy from North Carolina, and Alyssa Nair from Chicago. Nair has been the locked-in starter for the U.S. Women's National Team since about 2016. She has 67 caps. But Jane Campbell and Casey Murphy seem to have been the 2 that Vlatko has identified as his 2 backups. I would like to see some of them get some playing time. I doubt it'll happen. Defenders, Alana Cook from Paris Saint-Germain, who will stay in the country of France. That's quite nice. Abby Dahlkemper coming from Manchester City in England. Tanner Davidson at Chicago. Crystal Dunn now at Portland. Kelly O'Hara for Washington. Midge Purse with no longer Sky Blue FC. It is now Gotham FC, a great rebrand. Becky Sauerbrunn for Portland, and Emily Sonnet at Washington Spirit. So a pretty no-duh group of defenders there, I'll say. Nothing surprising. In the midfield, Julie Ertz from Chicago, Lindsey Horan at Portland, Rose Lavelle also at Manchester City, Christy Mewis at Houston Dash, Sam Mewis at Manchester City. We got 3 of them over there. And Andy Sullivan from Washington. She was a late call-in due to some COVID issues and injuries. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The forwards, Carly Lloyd at Gotham FC, Alex Morgan at Orlando, Kristen Press for Manchester United, Megan Rapinoe for OL Reign, Sophia Smith at Portland, and Lynn Williams from North Carolina. I don't really think any of these were shocks. The only thing I'll say is that Vlatko has to work to narrow down his roster to 18 players for this Olympic tournament. And right now he has 24 on this roster. Now, obviously, you can do that here. And you'll probably see that in the lead up to the Olympics. Tournament of Nations will be going on this summer as well. I expect him to, bring his 18 that he thinks, but you'll obviously have people there to supplement because you are allowed to. But the challenge for him is who makes that 18-player squad, especially with really only being able to have 15 outfield players. It looks like the goalkeepers are kind of set, but the outfield players are going to be a tall order to whittle down because there's just so much talent in this pool. And as NWSL continues to progress, and we have seen even last year, girls like Christy Mewis take advantage of the domestic season. I'm interested to see how Vlatko looks at NWSL performance as you go into the Olympic tournament. So that's the roster. Again, 24 girls, 3 goalkeepers, 8 defenders, 7 midfielders, 6 forwards. I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what I expect this team to do against both opponents when we get there, but just some general questions. I mentioned I'd love to see someone not named Alyssa Nair get some minutes in these 2 friendlies. I don't think that will happen. I'm pretty sure Alyssa will play both matches, all matches long, but I would love to see either Jane Campbell or Casey Murphy get some time with these the girls in front of them, just because I think there's this idea that, you need your number one keeper to be the number one keeper and always be there and have a good rapport with the team and really good chemistry with your backline. But for Alyssa Nair, I don't think that's an issue right now. She's got 67 caps. Most of those are with the girls that are playing in front of her. I mean, Becky Sauerbrunn, Crystal Dunn, Abby Dahlkemper, and even, Emily Sonnet have played with Nair almost, exclusively for the past 5 years. So I don't know if that's the issue. I just want to see Campbell and Murphy get some time so we can see them with this team in a little bit more of a competitive environment. I think it would be good for them to have that experience just in case something happens to Nair before or during the Olympic tournament. On the defensive side, I don't really have any real problems with this. I would love to see Alana Cook and Midge Purce get real playing time as well. I think we missed Cook during the She Believes Cup, so I'd like to see her play during these 2 games. I think that she offers a lot, both defensively but on the ball for the U.S. women, and I think that she would fit well into Vlatko's system, as does Midge Purce. I think Midge Purce fits Vlatko's kind of more of aggressive attacking system, and she also is a really good she can press really well, and I think that's something that Vlatko wants as well. So I think these are 2 girls who can really execute what Vlatko sees his team doing. So I'm hoping that we can actually see them live in the flesh during this window. The real big question mark I have personally is if Andy Sullivan gets minutes. I don't think you have to worry about her making an Olympic roster necessarily, because she plays a position that is pretty locked down, right? I mean, Julie Ertz is your defensive midfielder. Andy Sullivan's not necessarily going to replace her, but you have to be prepared, right? Julie Ertz may not be able to go to Tokyo. She's got an NWSL season coming up. You don't know what can happen. So I would love to see Sullivan get play at that 6th position, or maybe you're looking at someone like maybe Samantha Mewis or Lindsey Horan playing a little bit deeper, just to see what the midfield can do without Julie Ertz there. And these would be really good teams to try that against, at least for 30 minutes or a half, because of how talented they are, even with, a slight downgrade in the individual players, overall, Sweden and France are very, very, very strong teams. So this would be a good test to see, okay, if Julie's not able to play, who can fill that role better? We kind of saw this with the men back in the March friendlies where you didn't have Tyler Adams. So you had to make a number 6 out of Kellen Acosta. Yeah, that's his natural position, but really playing that for the men's national team, he hadn't done that in a while. You had to try it out. So Julie Ertz is a fantastic, I think she's maybe the most important player on this team at times. And you want her there, but you also just need to have that plan B. So that's my big question is if Andy Sullivan plays or if someone else plays a little bit for Julie Ertz against these teams, because I think this is going to be the best test that this U.S. team will face until the Olympics. I don't even think Tournament of Nations can be considered as high a level as these two teams that will play. And then a question that I'm going to hate to have to ask, they're kind of two questions together, but who plays at the striker position and why am I going to hate that Carly Lloyd is going to get significant minutes at the number 9? Alex Morgan is in camp. She should be quite healthy and ready to play, but Vlatko keeps Carly Lloyd around. And I know Carly loves to come on Twitter and battle with people. I have nothing against Carly Lloyd as a player or person. I think she has served this country and national team incredibly well, and I'm glad that 2015 World Cup was her shining moment. But her time has passed. And I know she's still performing okay, both for club and country, but really, it's time to move on. And as I keep repeating, the problem with Carly Lloyd is she's only able to play that striker position. Well, if Alex Morgan is your number 1 striker, why have someone sit directly behind her who can only do that? Sure, you want the experience of Carly Lloyd, but I don't buy that experience argument when you're probably going to have Kristen Press, Alex Morgan, Tobin Heath, and others who won a World Cup just 2 years ago. And a lot of those girls, started and contributed well in the 2015 World Cup. So it's not like experience is that big of an issue. I am concerned that Carly will get a lot of minutes and that will take minutes away from someone like Lynn Williams playing in that number 9 position, because I do think that Lynn offers a real solution to that backup number 9 position, because I think Lynn can play on the right. She's very good at that. But she can also play, or left, really. She can play on the wing. She's really good at that. But she can play in that hold-up striker position. And I would like to see her a little bit more in that position. Unfortunately, we won't have Katarina Macario. She is not in this camp because of COVID issues at her club, Olympique Lyonnais. That is a theme that we'll talk about when we talk about France as well. So, not having her kind of sucks, because she's another player who I feel like fills that role well and can play another role, probably even better, but still can play that role. So again, versatility is key for an Olympic roster, and I just don't think Carly offers that. And that's why I want to see other people play at that striker position. And that kind of leads me to my last question is just, can Lynn Williams find the back of the net? I'm really high on Lynn Williams. I think she's the most promising striker we have in the pool. I think she really, not even promising, I think she's the most problematic striker we have in the pool, because I think that she offers a lot going forward, both in her pressing play. She is very quick, very good taking on defenders. And I think that, especially as a winger, that's really good. But she does have this problem where she can be quite wasteful. She does need, it seems, a lot of chances to get that goal. So she just needs to be a little bit more efficient. I'm hoping we can see that now that she's kind of been in preseason training. And this will be, I think her 3rd training camp with the U.S. women's team this year. So hopefully that will bring back some crispness and freshness in front of goal. So yeah, that's the women's national team lineup, roster for the games against France and Sweden. I don't know what Vlatko wants to do for each game, but I would say that the first choice 11 would be Alyssa Nair in goal. Backline is, for me, it's Alana Cook, Dahlkemper, Sauerbrunn, and Dunn. In the midfield, your 3 have to be Julie Ertz. I like Rose Lavelle, but she's been injured, so I don't think she'll start. So we'll do Ertz, Horan, and Mewis as your 3 in the midfield. And then up top, Kristen Press out left. On the right, it'll be Lynn Williams. And in the middle, Alex Morgan. That's who I would put for my best 11 right now. or my first choice 11 right now, given the squad that I have in front of me. Okay, so let's talk USA versus Sweden. That is on Saturday, April 10th at 1 p.m. in Friends Arena in Solna, Stockholm, Sweden. That's the national team stadium. A battle between two very familiar foes. This is, I think, one of the teams that the U.S. has played most in its history. This could even be a preview of a Tokyo knockout round, as both teams are not only qualified, but probably favorites to advance from whatever group they're in. Obviously, with only 16 teams, that makes it a little bit more difficult, but your top two still advance, and you'd have to favor the U.S. and Sweden to advance from their group no matter what. We remember this being the quarterfinal round in the 2016 Olympics, where Sweden beat the U.S. playing a very negative, if you will, style of play. Hope Solo called them cowards. I don't necessarily agree with that word, but I agree with her sentiments that Sweden decided to just not play soccer. They bunkered and countered, and it worked. You got to credit that was Pia Sundhage, who was still coaching them. It worked. And that took them to, silver medal in that Olympic tournament. So, look, it was effective, but it certainly was not pretty. I will give a lot of credit to their coach, Peter Gerhardsson, who has revamped this team and taken them from a not negative approach, but a less proactive approach to being a team that does want to control the ball a little bit more. They're comfortable with the ball at their feet and creating offense through their own merits. And I think that you've seen that. They made a great run in the 2019 World Cup where they made the semifinal, ended up winning the third place match against England. So a bronze medal for Sweden in the 2019 Women's World Cup is pretty darn good. This roster is not going to be as strong as you would want it to be. It's probably not as strong as they had for their Euro qualifiers back in the fall of 2020. Again, some COVID things going on. We've got leagues in session and girls playing, in other leagues with COVID problems. So it's just not as strong as you would want it to be, but it's like probably a B+ or a solid B roster. It's really not bad. In goal, you have Jennifer Falk, Emma Holmgren, and Zakaria Musovic. I'll say that these goalkeepers don't really provide any real confidence to me. I think Falk would be your starter from BK Häcken FF, just because she's the one with the most experience. But we'll see. Defenders, Jonna Andersson from Chelsea, Magdalena Eriksson, also from Chelsea, Nilla Fischer from Linköpings FC in Sweden, Hannah Glass from Bayern Munich in Germany, Amanda Illestelt from Bayern Munich in Germany, Emma Kohlberg at BK Häcken, Josephine Rybrink of Kristianstad, Linda Sembrant from Juventus in Italy, and Jessica Wick from Rosengard in Sweden. Pretty solid defenders. A lot of these defenders have some experience, and you notice kind of a little bit more of an international flair. They're playing at really good clubs. Obviously, Chelsea, Bayern Munich are top level clubs in the world, and then Rosengard, one of the top teams in the women's. I'm going to try to say this: Damallsvenskan. That's the league in Sweden. So defender is pretty good. It's going to be a very organized defense. Still, that is a very hallmark of the Swedish national team. So the U.S. is going to have to work to break them down. That's why I think this is a good test to see which combination of three forwards can, really be the most effective. In the midfield, Filippa Angeldal from Häcken, Kosovari Aslani from Real Madrid, Hannah Bennison from Rosengard, Philippa Kumark from Häcken, Johanna Reiting Kaynard from Häcken, and Olivia Schau from Rosengard. And then also in midfield, their captain and probably one of the most prolific and most capped women in the Swedish national team history, Carolina Sager from Rosengard. Again, she's back at Rosengard. She's played everywhere. She's really good. She captained them, I think, at the 2016 World Cup or 2019 World Cup as well. So very, very experienced midfielder there. And then up top, this is where they're a little bit running, I don't want to say thin, but not with their best players. Stina Blacksteinas from Häcken, she's very good. She's an attacker that we will have to be very aware of. Rebecca Blomqvist from Wolfsburg in Germany, Lena Hurtig from Juventus in Italy, Sophia Jacobsen from Real Madrid in Spain, Madeleine Janogy from Hammarby, and Fridolina Rolfo from Wolfsburg. Now, the three girls that are missing are the three girls who were the leading scorers last year in the Swedish Damallsvenskan. Those are Pauline Hammarlund, Mimi Larsson, and Anna Anvergaard. All three of them were the leading scorers in the Swedish league. I think they had like 12 or 13 goals each in a very weird season for the Swedish women's league. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Maybe the U.S. won't have to worry about the attacking prowess as much, but you still have Stina Blacksteinas, who is a very prolific goal scorer in her own right, both club and country. So this team presents problems because they're going to be very organized and very, I don't want to say methodical in attack, but they're going to be very organized in defense and very crisp in their attack. They're not creative necessarily, but they're very good at passing, moving, and they have some creativity, both in Sager and Blacksteinas. So it's not like, an older Sweden team where they were going to defend, lock it long, and hope to run onto it. We watched them in the 2019 World Cup put up a pretty good fight against the U.S., but ultimately just didn't have the talent. And I think that'll be what we see here again. Again, Peter Gerhardsson has been in charge for about 4 years now and has really revamped the way that they approach the game. They're more proactive. They want to be the team that is trying to force play. And that kind of was evident in their European qualifiers. I think they had a goal differential of like plus 38 during the 8 games they played. Granted, I mean, look, they're playing like Latvia and Slovakia and teams like that, but like that's a really large margin of goals to for and against. So defensively, still really, really good, but they've learned how to create good offense. And again, you don't make a run to a World Cup semifinal and an Olympic final just on defense alone. 2016, they were very defensive, but they've learned how to take that defensive structure and then use that to help build their attack a lot better. And I'm very curious to see how that develops because they don't have their first choice attackers. Let's put it that way. So I'm still curious how that's going to work and how Gerhardsson is able to work with his team to still produce some offensive moments, if you will. Little bit of tidbit from this match. The last time that we played Sweden was actually Vlatko's first match in charge back in November of 2019. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, that's a little bit of a preview of Sweden. They have a lot of girls in their domestic league. The Damallsvenskan there's 14 on this roster who play there. The next was the Frauen Bundesliga in Germany with 4. The FA Women's Superliga has 3 players representing there, and then Italy and Spain both have 2. So Sweden does a good job of developing good talent at the women's international level. Their league is pretty solid, and they're able to get their players still shipped out and playing at better teams. I think that's important for the Scandinavian teams, understanding that like the Scandinavian teams, specifically Sweden and Norway, were the class of women's football for a while, right? You had the US, you had Norway, you had Sweden. In fact, the US and Norway won like most of the medals, and Sweden was either runner-up or third place for like the first 15 years of real international competition, from the 91 Women's World Cup up until like 2003 when Germany won theirs. So it's been a good, rich history and tradition of very good performances in international competition. But as of late, they've really, like I said, they've had to learn how to play more proactively because you have other teams like in Europe and even in, this half of the world that are learning how to play, not just being athletic, but being very skilled on the ball. And that was the hallmark of Scandinavian teams for forever. They're finally transitioning their athleticism into creativity. And I love to see that for Sweden. So that's Sweden. Let's move on to the U.S. versus France. The U.S. will play the French women's national team on Tuesday, April 13 at 3 p.m. Eastern at Stade Océan in Le Havre, France. Now, I will pause to say I have been to the stadium. This is where the U.S. actually played Sweden in the 2019 World Cup. Beautiful, beautiful stadium. Really cool. Le Havre is a really cool little town, like a harbor town on the north coast of France along the English Channel. Very pretty. It's a really cool experience. But enough about my trip to France. I don't want to be that guy. But I do want to remind you of that time that we beat France in the quarterfinal of the Women's World Cup that they hosted in their capital city. Do you remember that? Because I do, and that was really awesome. That was cool, and I will never let the French live that down because they should have beat us. They were so good. This team is not as good as that team because a lot of the best players in the French pool are unavailable because they play for Lyon, and Lyon's women's team has a very big issue with a COVID outbreak right now. A lot of players either have tested positive or via contact tracing have been ruled out for club and country for a while now. That happened to us with Catarina Macario. She's not in the squad because of this. So a lot of the best players not in the squad. We're talking Amandine Henry, no Wendy Renard, no Buhati. The only Lyon player in this squad is Eugenie Le Sommer. So it's a struggle. But luckily for France, they have a very good domestic league from which they can pull better players. So I will say that I think Ligue 1 Feminine is, for my money, the best league for women's football in the world. You have Lyon, you have Paris Saint-Germain, you have Paris FC, you have Bordeaux, you have Montpellier. You have a lot of really good, solid clubs that have invested in their women's side. And this is evidenced by the fact that, I think the best players in the world want to go to France to play, be it at Paris or Lyon. And they constantly have these two teams in the final 4 or at least 8 of the UEFA Champions League. Lyon has won it, I think, 5 times in a row, something like that. It's been a dominant run for Lyon, but that has helped the French Women's League and the French national team as a whole. So, looking at this roster, you have 3 goalkeepers. Again, Sarah Buhati, the traditional number 1 for France, not in this. So, Solène Duran from Guingamp, Pauline Perraud-Magnan from Atletico Madrid, and Constant Pical from Le Havre. I think that Perraud-Magnan will start. She is a pretty good keeper at Atletico Madrid and has, of the other 2, I think she has the most caps. So I would expect that Perraud-Magnan will start. Defenders, Estelle Cascarino, Elisa de Almeida from Montpellier, Océane Delande from Stade de Reims, Grace Casati from Atletico Madrid, Perla Moroni from Paris Saint-Germain, Yves Perisset from Bordeaux, Julie Thibault from Bordeaux, Marion Tarrant from Montpellier, and Aissatou Tounkara from Atletico Madrid. So again, Bordeaux filling out this roster quite nicely in the place of Lyon. The midfielders are Kinza Dali from West Ham, Grace Gayoro from Paris Saint-Germain, Ines Warena from Bordeaux, Orion Jean-Francois from Paris FC, Leah Khalefi from Paris Saint-Germain, and Ella Pali from Bordeaux. So I'm really kind of curious to see how this midfield 6 work because, again, you're missing some players from Lyon that normally would be playing. And you don't have Henri. You don't have a lot of players who I would normally say would be in this lineup. So very young and inexperienced, but also very promising. And I think that's a pretty decent thing for Corian Diarcy, the manager of the French women's national team, because I think that this is a good learning opportunity for them. You don't have an Olympics coming up this year, so you can really experiment to see who can fill out that roster for next year's UEFA Women's Euro. And up top, you have Viviane Asseyi from Bayern Munich, Sandy Baltimore from Paris Saint-Germain, Kadetio Diani, who is, for my money, the best attacker in this squad right now, Louise Fleury from Guingamp, Valerie Galvan from Everton, Marie-Antoinette Catoto from Paris Saint-Germain, and Eugene Le Sommer from Olympique Lyonnais. So Le Sommer from Lyon and Diani from PSG, those are my two that I would have starting for my money. I don't really know the other three, the other third striker that would start. We'll see. I think this is going to be a very interesting France side, and it will be a good test of their depth. And really, again, I think this is a way to showcase that they are one of the deepest national teams in the world right now. And again, a great way to showcase the strength of the French league. So yeah, they're not going to Tokyo 2020. Again, we beat them in the quarterfinals, meaning that they were not one of the top, I think, 3 or 4 teams in Europe to finish in the World Cup, which is how Europe does their qualifying, which is a little bit weird how they do their qualifying for the Olympics, but hey, that's interesting. So you have Netherlands, England, Sweden going, but not France. Quite a disappointment, honestly, for the French. They have already booked their ticket for the Euro 2022, so that's not that big of an issue. But, again, this is going to be kind of experimental for them. DRC, wondering how she's going to approach this match. They do play England on the Friday before this. So Friday, April 9, they'll play England, which is also kind of a little bit in a revamp after Phil Neville left them kind of unexpectedly. Not super unexpectedly, but kind of. So they're officially in rebuild or revamp mode as well as England is. But that's why I think France might be a little bit more experimental, because you have a game against England that not quite sure how that squad will look with a new manager. And then you've got a U.S. team that is pretty much at full strength. And, this is probably a good trial by fire for a lot of the girls in the squad. It's just unfortunate that we don't get to see the best players, because for the U.S., that's who you want to see. But at the end of the day, you're not going to see this team in the Olympics. So, you don't have to worry about facing Wendy Renard in Tokyo. You don't have to worry about Amélie Henry and the other midfielders that can dominate a game dominating you. So, hey, it'll be not the USA-France matches we have become accustomed to, but I still think this will be a really fun one. And I do expect, actually, with these attackers to be quite hungry and quite vicious in their attack. I would like to see. They're all pretty young. The attacking 6 that DRC has chosen, and I think that they actually. I mean, Diani, I've already said she's going to be good, but Asai is going to be fun to watch. Catoto will be fun to watch, and I'm interested to see how Valerie Galvan from Everton translates to the French national team. It'll be interesting. I do expect the U.S. to beat France, because it's just not as high of a level of team as we've seen. The Sweden match will be a much more difficult match, just because they are a pretty solid core that they have, and they've been playing together. Even the players who are added, this core has been playing together for Sweden for a while, and Gerhardsson has his team playing in a very identifiable style, if you will. So very excited to see what the U.S. can do against better competition, albeit still not top level competition. Probably the best team we've played so far is Brazil in this year, and we beat them 2-0. So these two teams ranked higher, but because of the roster strength, not sure if they're necessarily better than Brazil. I'd say they still probably are. So this should be a very worthwhile watch for anyone on Saturday, April 10, and Tuesday, April 13. Well, thanks for listening to me ramble about a couple of teams from Europe that we're about to play. I'm really excited to watch the U.S. women's national team play these two caliber of opponents, because they are quite honestly two of the best playing right now. Even if their squads aren't as strong as they normally are, these teams provide a good learning opportunity for the players who will be in this squad, and for Vlatko and Danovsky to kind of not necessarily experiment, but try some things at a higher level, or if anything, just continue to progress his system and trial his system at an even higher level than he has before during this year. I do have a question from Twitter. I asked for questions on Twitter. Follow us at Soccer for Us Pod. I try to ask for questions every time I record. Hopefully, you all continue to follow and ask some questions so I can answer them on the podcast. But I do have one. It comes from Eve St. Laurentowitz on Twitter at O_Lanta. And his question is, who are the most promising young candidates to be the target striker of the future for the U.S. women's national team? My answer is really two NWSL, quote, rookies. They didn't really play. They haven't really played in NWSL yet. But the first is Haley Mace, who played her college ball at UCLA, then went to Melbourne City FC to play in Australia, then to FC Rosengard in Sweden, and is now at the North Carolina Courage. She actually also, again, played in Sweden last year during the weird 2020 season. I like Haley Mace a lot. She has some similar skill. She's like a weird hybrid between this is giving her a lot of praise, but it's a little bit between the Abby Wambach and Alex Morgan roles. So Alex Morgan is a very good hold-up player because she's very technical and skilled on the ball, whereas Abby Wambach was very tall, strong, and used her body well. And I think Haley Mace does both. I think she's able to control the ball with her feet, but also is very good at using her body to shield the ball from defenders, but also using her body to kind of turn and get in behind defenders. She's also pretty quick and is able to get on balls, through balls that get into the box. So I think Haley Mace is someone who I would like to see more of. She does have a couple of caps for the senior national team. So she's already kind of in the system. I would like to see more of her because I do think that as especially Carly Lloyd gets transitioned out and as Alex Morgan just, continues to age, she is 31. I think that you're going to have to start looking for who is that replacement, who is the next U.S. number 9. So I think Haley Mace is a good shout and someone who during this NWSL season that starts Friday, you can take a good look at. The other one is Allie Watt, who plays for LL Reign, but came out of college from Florida State, went to North Carolina Courage, and then it also went on a little sabbatical to Melbourne City in Australia. A lot of players are doing this now where they will play in the NWSL season and then go abroad. And it's a really good development. And I really think that it helped Allie Watt learn how to progress from the college game where she was just bigger and more dominant and faster and stronger and more physical. All those things that like the top level players are in the college game. She learned how to play a little bit more as a professional because, you leave the college game and sure, you are a very, quick and strong and technically gifted attacker, but you're playing against defenders who are used to that and are just as big and strong as you are. I really do think that Allie Watt, though, more than just her athleticism, has a very great finishing touch. Some of the goals she scored, both at Florida State and for the U.S. Youth teams, are really amazing. She does a really good job, first off, of getting just a little bit of separation because she's fast, because she's able to use her body to kind of shield off a defender and just get like a yard. But when she's had a couple of goals that from long range too are so perfectly placed that it's really amazing to see someone be running at such a very fast pace, be able to pinpoint a shot the way she does. So I think Allie Watt has a good chance, especially during this NWSL season, to show off what she can do against some very strong defenders at NWSL. And I think she has a chance after these Olympics are over in the summer to hopefully start getting some reps with the senior national team. I think Allie Watt and Haley Mace have the best chance to be the next number 9s. And then the other one that I will say is Katarina Macario. She's already on the team. She's played in that number 9 position before. I think that, honestly, I'd rather her come be the second striker who can also be a creative midfielder and be in that Olympic squad. I think she's already ready for it. Again, thanks for the question, Olanta, Eve St. Laurentowitz. You can follow him at Olanta on Twitter. You can follow us at Soccer for Us Pod on Twitter. Follow the podcast. I will put out my thoughts on U.S. men's national team stuff and U.S. women's national team stuff. Again, we have NWSL starting Friday. The NWSL Challenge Cup begins this weekend. It's all weekend long. You can watch it on CBS Sports, CBS, and Paramount Plus. But the point is, please follow the podcast. And as I ask for questions or feedback, I'd love for you to respond. so we can make this show a little bit more interactive. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Soccer for Us. Don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcatcher you are listening right now so you don't miss an episode of Soccer for Us or the Daily Soccer Down Here show. Once again, I'm Bart. I'm out.